Tonight's session is entitled What's in It for Me? Quite often, as somebody who has been supporting and helping women in their careers for 20 years and might be described as a male ally, I'm regularly asked, why are you doing this? What's in it for you, Mark? And in preparation for this session, I asked some of you, some of our members, that same question. And broadly, the answers came back as career, health and well-being, opportunity and choice, and responsibility. So let me just go through those one by one. From a career perspective, people told me that male allies, inclusionists, people who are on the journey tend to build better teams that build better products and services. By improving the balance in your team, by increasing diversity, you increase both your own team, both your own and your team's learning potential. The more diverse thinking that goes into the development of a product or a service, the more attractive it will be to a wider audience, bringing in more customers, more revenue, and more rewards. It will make you better at your job. Embracing a different worldview can help you become a more effective manager. Even if you're not in a management position and don't consider yourself to be a leader, this can still help in your career by enabling you to deal with people in a far more effective way. It can increase your personal resilience. Being an ally will enable you to build a support network, a network with people both inside and outside of work that will be supportive when times get tough. Apparently also, you'll have more fun. It gives you the opportunity to have a lot more fun in the workplace. We've been to many great events with diversity and inclusion in theme, and it makes everybody feel good, but also you get much more variety, much more choice, you do more things. Moving on to health and well-being. I think Jill can explain this, but there's a paradox of power here. The more power you get, the more you offset other areas of your life, typically to do with health and well-being. So in gender equal...
Do you want me to explain it, Mark?
Go on, Jill. Yeah. Go on. Thank you. Go on.
There's a ton of research. There's a ton of research behind all of this. So the issue is that the societies are run kind of still around the models that men set up, and there's a lot of pressure on men to perform in a certain way. You know, to be the ambitious person, to be risk taking in their career, to put their career above all other concerns. And so the power that comes with that, you know, the fact that we're all still, women are underrepresented in the workplace at many different levels, but that power has a cost, and that cost is often to your own health. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest, and it comes from places like the World Health Organization. So there are multiple mega studies. So we all know that men are more likely to commit suicide. Men are more likely to experience stress. Men are more likely to indulge in the kind of behaviors, alcohol consumption, etc., that arise from the risk-taking norm, but also arise from the stress that men are particularly under. So the difficulty here is that the paradox is there's actually a cost for men for the fact that men haven't asked too many questions about what is it to be a man and what are the disadvantages, and how can helping women and help challenge gender stereotypes help us all.
Thanks, Jill.
I've done now.
Good. Thank you. So we're healthier and more mentally, or mental well-being. Apparently, another study shows that, I need to get this right, that men with feminist partners and women with partners who support feminism have better sex. So just food for thought there. The coming on now to opportunity and choice. I look back at my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and it just seems to me that they were living in a world that was very different from the world we're living in now, and very different to the world I would really like to live in going forward. My father wasn't at my birth. He was down the pub, because that's where men were when their wives were giving birth in the 60s. My father followed in his father's career footsteps, because that was what was done. My grandfather never felt that he could climb the corporate ladder. His ambitions were limited because of his social background. Today we have so much more choice in other areas. We can be stay-at-home fathers if we want to be. When I went to the school gates for the first time 20 years ago and was still there 3 months later, people thought I was strange and different. The women thought I was strange. It's now becoming the norm. We have so much more opportunity to be ourselves and choice in how we behave, and we're not constrained by those social norms. The fourth thing that I picked up was actually that we have a responsibility here. If you look back in history, a lot of the progress we've made, right from the suffragettes demanding votes for women, they fought for votes for women, but it was more men got the vote for the first time in 1918, because property owning or non-property owning men got the vote for the first time then. But if you look through history, whether that's equal pay, the Dagenham women fighting for it, maternity leave, part-time working, all of these activities have been fronted by women, and we as men have benefited. And I think it's about time that we stood up and got counted as well, and started taking this agenda forward. Those are my thoughts. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'd like to know, do those resonate? What are your thoughts? David, I'm going to bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one that, not to start off a negative point, the one I always struggle with is the responsibility one. I think it implies, if I've understood it correctly, that we have a responsibility to make this change. I can't deny that we do, but at the same time, that all the others are so much more positive. They imply far greater positivity for you as an individual, as a male ally. It's the kind of, it's the being an ally, and whether you're entirely comfortable with that sort of term in terms of helping poor women to help themselves, which none of us want that to be the message. But the others, that definitely the health and well-being, that definitely resonates as a general rule of thumb in terms of wanting to advance others, and being not being the nice guy. That's a terrible phrase. Being a helper, it's kind of it's something you can be very comfortable doing, and the reward is both indirect from the progress that you make and the environment that you work in, and also just the general thing that if you're doing something to advance somebody, you will feel good about that. It's a straightforward, helping somebody out perspective.
Okay.
Mark, I'd like to add one thing that has increasingly occurred to me as I've been kind of part of some of these conversations. And I think one of the real benefits for people is it helps them develop a few new skills. And one of the most interesting ones, I think, is developing the skill of kind of curiosity. because a lot of this is about trying to understand, someone who's different to you's kind of perspective. And that sounds very simple, and a lot of people talk about walking in other shoes and stuff like that. But I found that by forcing myself into potentially uncomfortable conversations or uncomfortable positions and trying to remain curious and keep asking questions, it's probably helped me get slightly better at doing that. And I think that's a really important thing that kind of develops you within your career, is that ability to start finding the questions that you need to ask people. And it takes practice. And I think one of the things this has helped me with is practicing those types of things.
It also helps you develop empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally with you, David.
Andy, I see you nodding there.
I was, yes. I think the empathy part of it. Sorry, my tea's just arrived. Excellent timing, thank you. Yeah, I think the empathy is very important. I mean, my team is mixed in a number of ways, and I think probably the most important part of that is the diversity of thinking. The diversity of thinking and just makes it a more interesting environment to work in. I think empathy for other people is important. I think just the idea of equality, the idea that one person hasn't got such a chance of being promoted or getting on just isn't right yet in the 21st century. My partner did have one question. Your research on the feminist sex thing, how did you come to that conclusion?
It wasn't my research. It was an American piece of research, and it was done by psychologists.
Okay.
There are academic papers on it, and they basically asked questions about many things, including sexual satisfaction. And when they analysed it afterwards, they discovered that that there was a link between those who were feminists or supported by feminists in terms of how satisfied they said they were with their sex, which also linked, of course, to how satisfied they were with their relationships, because there was a lot more sharing. There's a lot more sense of we'll share the domestic sphere. Because my big observation about all of this power stuff is it all starts with the domestic, with gender. It all starts with our roles at home. And unless we start changing some of that, I think the workplace stuff doesn't come very easily to people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think while you're talking about roles, role models as parents and uncles, aunts, whatever, as well, is very important.
Yeah, it's funny, whenever I talk to people about where did this start, when did they start thinking like this, and the vast majority of them go back to it started at home, and I think it's so important, therefore, that we actually think about that in how we're bringing our children up, and because those seeds are being sown now.
I think from my side of it, it's a bit of more of a responsibility thing than anything else. I've been involved for the last 2.5, 3 years with health and well-being at our organization, and it created much more of an awareness of the types of people that I'm talking with. And I deal with, for the most part, with graduates coming into our organization, and you start realizing I'm responsible for helping them form what is going to be their career, their next steps, and I felt it was responsible of me to be much more aware of these things. When you start having conversations with people who might be of an ethnic background, you realize that there's things. It's the what do you call it? The things that you really weren't aware of that you were doing. That makes it. It's important that you're in much more in tune in a role that depending on what you're doing. But given that I had a lot of grads that are coming involved into the company, I felt it was responsible of me to be able to empathize with them, understand where potentially they're coming from, and then be able to help them.
Yeah, I mean, my interest has been similar to that for transparency. And Gary and I worked together at a former firm, and we had a huge both graduate and apprenticeship scheme running. And for me, it was really interesting to understand their perspectives and their aspirations, and what are the things in a corporate environment that could potentially block them in future as well. It was also interesting when we did some of the Men as Allies workshops, and you know, some of the things that people quote in those workshops, and you know, I read the book that's been written, and some of those are quoted in there, and you just think, dear God, who are these people? And some of the attitudes and the things that they come out with, you know, and I did hear the one internally about, you know, well, you were the diversity candidate for promotion this year. It was actually said to somebody in a former firm. I like, just who the hell are these people? You know, that even have those kinds of attitudes. It just amazes me in the 21st century. You know, and I've got a vested interest. I've got a 28-year-old daughter. I've got a 2-week-old granddaughter. I don't want this stuff for them to have to deal with in their careers as well, which is pure self-interest.
Ian, building on what you just said, I'm wondering if, as well as having the conversation about women's experience, does anybody ever ask, do you have any issues because of your gender when you're a man? Kind of what's tough about being a man in your organization or in your life? Does anybody ever ask that? And if I can ask it now, what would the answers be?
I think there is a perception, that certainly heard in the last. So for all of the success of the work that Gary and others did, there is also a perception amongst some of the men that actually the dice are loaded against them because of the focus on diversity as well. You know, I've heard people say, well, you know, I'll never get promoted to this position because I'm a man. You know, I've heard it in other countries actually about colour, and actually said by white people rather than black people in South Africa. Literally, one of my staff in a prior organisation I worked in Africa said to me, I'll never get promoted because I'm the white guy in South Africa. So it impacts all kinds of people in different situations in different ways.
I did have a scenario where I was asked, well, they would, my team do a lot of media commentary and things like nothing major, just a bit here and there. And I was told that they didn't want me to do it because they wanted a female to do it. Didn't bother me that much because actually the marketing media stuff is actually an inconvenience on our team. But it bothers one of my colleagues, a white bloke, because he's like, oh, they can't say that to you. And I was like, I don't really care, to be honest. But just because you asked, that was a scenario where it was called out, and it bothered someone else more than it bothered me. It's similar to what Ian just said. It will essentially that's the scenario.
But Jamie and Ian, I think, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but the question was more about you know, how do we behave as men, and are we asked how this affects us? And you know, for me, I've worked for male bosses who have expectations on me, on the way that I will behave. You know, I've got to go down the pub. I've got to drink 6 pints of bitter. I've got to go and do this. I've got to, you know, I've got to support a certain football club, or you know, be involved in men's banter and all that kind of stuff. And you know, frankly, sometimes, more often than not, I didn't want to be involved in that. The other side of that is, I think, you know, when I started work, you know, I didn't go to university. I went straight to work, and I looked up, and I couldn't see anybody on the management team that I could relate to, that was a role model. And because of that, you kind of think, well, am I ever going to get there? I'm ambitious, but because I didn't go to public school or private school, and I didn't go to university, and I come from a certain part of London, that perhaps I won't make it. Is that what you were asking, Jill? Is it? Yeah. Has anybody else felt that?
I'll definitely. I think interesting we obviously obviously took the question slightly differently, but I've seen that side as well, and I don't drink, and I have worked in workplaces before, probably actually early on in my career when I was sort of working in the sort of boiler room sales. It was you're down the pub every night because it was just the done thing. It wasn't so much. It didn't feel too much. There were males and females in that workplace. It didn't feel like a masculine, it didn't feel like a blabbish thing, but it was just a kind of done thing, and you did it because it was what everyone did, kind of thing.
Yeah. Kevin, because I think as I've got older and more successful and that kind of stuff, I'm more capable of standing up to that. I'm more capable of saying no. I'm more capable of calling things out. When you're bringing young graduates into your business, how do you make sure that they're behaving inclusively, and how do you make sure that they know there's opportunity for all?
Well, I mean, it is part of our makeup as an organization that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be, and it's impressed upon people right from the very beginning. But for me, I find inclusivity is not just a color or a male-female thing. It's I'm a born and bred Canadian who's lived in London since 1995, but I still get asked, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I get asked that all the time, that sort of thing, because I haven't developed an English accent for some reason, or whatever it happens to be. And those sort of things have impact. It's had an impact on my working career since I've been in this country, where I've had, where I haven't gotten roles because I wasn't English, pure and simple, those kind of things. So we try and make sure that we're impressing it upon our grads all the way from day one, that we are inclusive, and we talk about it all the time. We make sure that people know that we're aware of that. We still have the same standard. If you look at the management board, it's mostly old white blokes sort of thing, but it's getting better. It's not entirely that way, but it is getting better. And those are the challenges that I think a lot of organizations, companies that have been around for any length of time are always going to have until, I mean, we're consciously doing it. It's just it's a process that takes quite a long time, but we try to impress upon it on their grads from day one. And we certainly don't tolerate any kind of that behavior. They won't see it. I don't feel they won't see it within their peers when they're going out. They won't experience that sort of thing. I mean, they're all too happy to go to the pub, that sort of thing. But it doesn't. Nobody is shunned because they don't. If that's that sort of thing.
Okay.
May I ask another question? I just wondered, because you mentioned Andy and I think it was Ian as well. The it was Jamie. Sorry. The people the backlash. The people who are saying, the people who are privileged in my organisation are the women, the white women. It's not me. So, against this "what's in it for me" topic, what have you said that's worked with people who you feel, or because of what they've said, are more resistant to this idea of behaving in an inclusive way? And maybe Ahmed and Mohammed, who haven't got their cameras on, maybe you've got a point of view on that.
I'll tell you what I said to that particular scenario I mentioned earlier about the marketing. It was I just, like, to be fair, I made a bit of a joke of it, and I just went, "Who needs to see another bald white bloke on TV, right?" But but at the same time, it's probably the motivation behind our marketing team's approach at the same time. But the same chap also at one point to me, talking about this very group of people. He's talking about the thing about inclusion, and the comment that kind of leads to what you're saying, Jill, is he said it's a one-way street. It's why, and he almost a working title for this, for this session. It's a one-way street. What's in it for him, kind of thing. And I just say to him that we don't need we don't need it to be a two-way street. We've got enough enablement, and we've got the fact that the dice is generally stacked. The fact that we have to call out scenarios where we might feel aggrieved because there's a bit of positive, you know, if you want to call it positive discrimination, or, you know, if you want to use that term, you know, we can count the situations on one hand. Kind of, it pales into comparison to the challenges that other people feel, and that's why it's on us, because we've got it easy, and we can help other people to level the playing field. You know, like I say, he needs to know what's in it for him. It's hard to answer that question if they don't want to.
In there, I've tried to make the point to people about it and try to call out the absurdity of the coincidence that as I choose to return to work as a middle-aged white man, it doesn't take me long to get a job, and I've been on calls every Wednesday for about 18 months with a lot of women, a lot of mothers, a lot of women who are a little older, a lot of women of non-white ethnicity, and they've spent a long time looking for work. Now, that could be a coincidence. You know, let's not say it's not a coincidence, but it's really difficult to answer that, because, you know, if you can pick of other examples. And I had this conversation with the boss when I said, you know, my entire team is male. Okay, it wasn't all white and it wasn't all English, but it was all male. And you have to come down to the point where I want to improve the gender diversity in my team. I need to employ a woman. And you have the same arguments about, well, you know, what about all the many disadvantages? Yes, that's because I've taken a positive step. And yes, there is quite possibly a man somewhere out there, when I only want a shortlist of 5 and I want the predominance of women on that shortlist, that won't get a chance of looking at this job. But I can promise you, if I hadn't taken that positive step towards a gender balance, I would have got an all male, if not exclusively, vast majority male shortlist. But it's really, you know, my question was going to be the exact one you've asked the other way around, which was kind of like, what do you say to people like that? How can you convince somebody that, you know, we don't need International Men's Day, although people may support this, we have 364 others. You know, we should be okay with that. It's really difficult, and it's not the answer to sort of, I'm laughing now, but if you laugh at people when they make these points, it doesn't go down well, you know.
I think we do have to just accept that there are some that we're just never going to convince, and it doesn't matter what we do. Certainly from Gary and my last firm, there is a layer of middle management, shall we say, you know, and guys in their late 40s, 50s, who were brought up very differently. It was interesting, somebody mentioned generational earlier on, were just brought up very differently. And at this stage of their careers, frankly, don't want to change, don't care. They're headed towards their retirement, don't want to get involved, just want to get their head down and make this go away.
On the frost level.
And I don't think you'll ever change those people.
Do you think that there are some people who are changeable? I mean, if there's more going on around them, if the environment around them is changing because more people are acting in this different way, do you think that there are a group of men who are at the moment either ambivalent or unconvinced, who might come along with this journey?
I think there are some that you could convince, and there are some that you will just never convince. So
to a point, I think it depends on how far you go with trying to if not use the word convert, but to, you know, convince them, shall we say, because when you get into things like unconscious bias training, if you get a rubbish course that gets into what words you use in certain situations, I'm not saying that using the wrong words isn't a good thing to do, but there's sometimes we carry it too far, and when you get to some people, it won't compute, and they'll just dismiss it, really. But if you create the awareness, and for me, say I'm in my, you know, middle upper level of 50s, and you be made aware of certain things, and if you're not aware of them, and if you're not willing to listen, then you'll never change. But I think if the more you expose it and do it in a such way that makes sense without being, you know, politically correct, if that's the right way to describe it, you know, sometimes you won't catch on, you won't get everybody getting on board. You'll get more people on board if it makes logical sense to them when you're trying to explain these things.
Kevin, and I think can I just come back to that. So I think there is hope.
It's hard to believe. I'm in my middle 50s. I know. I know.
No. But I think there is hope. If you people on the call here today, we probably used to laugh at Benny Hill. We know that's not acceptable now. We probably watch the black and white minstrels on television. We know that's not acceptable. We have changed. I think then it is about, okay, how do we accelerate that change, and how do we make that change happen? So often I'm approached as, strong man, come along and support weak woman, or I don't think that's not the right message. And what we were trying to get across tonight was, what's in it for me is we've got to go and tell those people who are backlash, or maybe the vast majority of men who just sitting there and thinking this isn't for me. We've got to explain to them why it's for them, what's in it for them. And if we do that, and we do that successfully, I think we then get more men on board, and we start accelerating progress.
Yeah, and I think as an organization, your company, it's only going to get better by doing that, because what you get is the best people. When we hire all the grads, we don't intentionally set out to hire 10 guys and 10 girls. We will hire the best 20 people that come across, and invariably for as long as I've been doing it, we've counted up at the end of it, and we've ended up with it'll be 9 blokes and 11 women, or the other way around, or something like that. It's been a mix and match. It's not intentional. We're just looking to get the best people, and by putting those messages across, that gets out, and people will get that. So
and I do wonder when I hear this, she only got the job because I wonder whether 10 years ago they would have been saying, he only got the job because. Are they the same people? Maybe not.
Pat, I think you're waiting to come in, aren't you? Pat and then Nat.
Well, it's interesting because I'm sure there's always been this kind of thing. They only got the job because their educational background or the part of the country they came from, and most of us probably have our own versions of that runs at different times. I was really struck by the comment about the generational shift. And I wonder if part of what we need to be thinking about here is, if I think about your grads who are coming in, Kevin, they get it. They don't need to be told anything. They don't need it explained to them, because they get it anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's almost, how do we free up? And the analogy I'll use is, if you think about what's happened in the last 20 years with same-sex couples, and how societally, of course, there's a rump of people who think, have the old attitudes, but by and large, that just feels like it is part of the past. It's not part of today. If we think about that in workplace, in terms of diversity in the workplace, and opportunities for people, whoever they are, whatever they look like, wherever they come from, that generation's ready. To me, it's more about thinking about us a group of, by and large, older, the classic white male pale stale group, is how we can enable what that generation already knows to come through, because they will clear out some of the attitudes that are already there and already feeling passé to them, or they'll vote and go elsewhere because they won't like what they're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah.
And that feels like, I mean, actually to the point, Mark, that you're saying, there's a job for us to do. I think part of the job for us to do is probably to create some space for that generation to move into. I'll share that now.
No, I agree with you. So we've got Nat and Evelina joined us. So just wondering what you're thinking about this conversation tonight.
Sure, I'm happy. Oh, Evelina, do you want to go first?
No, please go ahead.
Pop your mic on. This is a great conversation, and Mark, thank you for facilitating these. It's the first one that I've attended. And gosh, there's so many points that I would love to talk to, but the one that struck me the most at the beginning, when you kind of highlighted the benefits that I maybe hadn't thought of before in that way, was the health and well-being part. Actually, perhaps unsurprisingly, because that's kind of the line of work that I'm in now, having left the city. So I'm slightly obsessed about that. But I think that's it's a unique way of potentially even communicating the benefits of, what is in it for me. I know that, everybody wants more health, everybody wants more energy, everybody wants more time with their kids and their family. And this is not just a matter of millennials who, you're right, generationally, they want all of those things even more. But I think, I used to work with men, ranging from 25 to 50s, 60s. And they all want the same things, but yet, we're working in a system that's so traditional in the way that it defines performance and success. And quite frankly, everybody is tired of it. Maybe not everybody, but most people are burning out somewhere. And we can't, someone mentioned leveling the playing field. And I think that's what that is, because we can't. If we want to attract more women in the workplace, we have to level the playing field. My experience is, and this might be an interesting point for Kevin, but to even hear from on, but my experience is a lot of women who get recruited into finance or banking are almost like men in the traditional kind of sense, but with a female kind of cover. And that's great because it does level the playing field in some way, but we're not catering to everybody's needs in the way that we really should be doing when we talk about diversity and inclusion and all of that. So slightly long-winded answer, but
no, that's the if it had been Lehman Brothers and sisters, it wouldn't have failed. But if the sisters had all been made to act like brothers, it may have failed quicker. Scenario, I think, at the end there. Thank you, Nat. Evelina.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm also joining this for the first time. I, became aware of Men for Inclusion, I think last month, and I've been following your newsletters very, very closely. So this is actually the first, event that I'm joining. So I'm really happy to be, part of this amazing discussion. And, again, we can probably spend the next few hours debating this topic, but I'm actually in the process of putting together a presentation for our senior leadership team. I work for MasterCard, and we had a conversation today about how can we articulate the value that, gender equality will bring to us, and specifically to the, topic that we're all discussing tonight. How can we, reach out to the men and make them understand why this is important? So I'm finding this, very helpful and valuable. I don't want to take away, too much time. I know we're at the end of the session, but I think just one quick comment for me. I completely understand the point that, Pat was making about, needing to make sure that, we think about the older generation and how they perceive like the whole issue around, gender equality. And, maybe we need to do some more work to convince them to, that there's benefit in all of this. But in my experience as well, even with the younger generation and the graduates, some of them still, maybe because of their upbringing, maybe because of their fathers and their grandfathers, they still have some of those old stereotypes in their mind. So we absolutely need to make sure that we focus equally on everyone, on all age groups, all men, from the most junior one to the most senior one. And we just need to make sure that we have role models at every level in the company, at every seniority level, to role model positive behaviors for everyone, not just senior people, but junior people, men and women alike. So yeah, these are my quick thoughts.
Evelina, thank you. Thank you. And we are talking to MasterCard, as you may know.
Yes.
So I look forward to helping you corporately.
Me too.
Brilliant. Has anybody got a final comment they'd like to make? A final thoughts?
I'll just make a few. Mark, thank you. This is my first time invited to this as well, so thank you for what's been a very interesting and fascinating discussion. I mean, I've been in financial services for the best part of 30 years. I've worked for a very inclusive organization for the last 30 years, which has been great. I mean, one of the first ones to come up with a real maternity policy for both men and women, which was great and has been applauded. And I just echo lots of what everybody said. The best teams I've worked for have been balanced teams, and the best bosses I've had have actually been females, not males. I think it makes for a healthier and happier workplace and a much more productive workplace to have balanced teams. So I think probably that's been said by most tonight, but it certainly would be something that I would echo as well.
Simon, thank you. The sun is going down out there. I think it's our last chance to get out and have a drink in this glorious weather. So I'm going to close there. Say thank you, everybody. It's been really great to see you. Thanks for your contributions. We're here again, same time, same place, 2 weeks' time. And the topic has been touched on a little bit tonight. It's about recruitment. Kevin, if you're coming along, you're talking about your graduates and graduate recruitment. That's something I know nothing about. But it'd be interesting to know what you're doing there to make sure you're getting the right balance on intake. If anybody else has got any experience in recruitment as well, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
It's been great to see you all. Thanks very much, and see you in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.